G'day there, Ray Corcoran here. In this week's video, we're going to be talking about how do you talk to your partner about money. Money and financial stress is a major driver of relationship and marriage breakdown. There's actually been studies in the States that have shown that 48% of people in the States actually do argue around money. And there was also a study done by TD Ameritrade that actually showed that one of the biggest drivers for divorces around a number of age groups was around money. So we know it's super important. We know people often argue about it, whether people are not making enough money, the bills are piling up, one person spends and one person's frugal, one person spends and the other person doesn't seem to have any fun. And it's a constant state of tension. And while I'm not going to give you any other relationship advice in this video, I wanted to talk about a few principles that you can use to make money a strength in your relationship. It's a little bit like those two-person kayaks. You know, if both people aren't completely in sync, it's not going to go as fast as it could be going. So the first thing that you need to do is understand your family history. Both you and your partner inherit good and bad money habits from your parents. So it would be naive of you to go into future money conversations without really understanding how they were raised and how their parents talked about money. Some people's parents were extremely frugal. Other people's parents were careless with their spending. Some people's parents say that rich people are evil. Some people's parents had jobs, others had businesses, and the list goes on. So there's so many different things that can affect your partner's beliefs in money, and whether they adopt those habits or not, it's very important to have that context to sort of understand where they're coming from and what kind of programming was kind of drilled into them from a very young age. The kind of questions you want to ask are, how did your parents talk about money when you were growing up? Were they good at saving? Were they big spenders? What did they believe? Did they believe in just, living in the moment and, you can't take it with you? What kind of common phrases were they saying growing up? Did they grow up in extremely tough times? So as a result, they're very, very careful with money. Did they invest? Did they not invest? What did they do for a job? Were they, very, very hard workers? Some people's parents were alcoholics. There's so many different variables in people's parents, and everybody's parents are doing their best, but it's important to understand that context before doing anything further. And often this conversation is quite interesting and eye-opening for a lot of people because they kind of start to see where they may have got some of their traits from and some of their beliefs around money. And whatever it is what it is, but at least that gives us an understanding and appreciation before getting frustrated at them for maybe some of their money habits now. The second tip is to get it out in the open around your goals. Both of you will typically have different goals and different objectives. If it aligns, fantastic. If it doesn't, which is probably more common, that's fine as well. But it's really important to understand very few people will actually verbalize their own goals or talk out loud about how they see their future going. Some people have no goals and may never, but other people have a very clear picture about how they would like their future life to be. And it's important for you to really verbalize that to each other so you can get a bit of a feel for I want to go this direction and you want to go that direction. You're going to have to discuss that. Some of the things I'd recommend asking are, what kind of ideal income would you like to be making? Whereabouts would you like to be living? What kind of house do you want to be living in? Potentially cars? What are your expectations of travel? What are sort of your future objectives? By what age would you like to reach some milestones? Because everyone's different. Some people, if they live in a modest house and they have a bit of money to go maybe to the movies and maybe go, surfing or whatever their hobbies are, if they can do that, they're going to be happy. Whereas other people, if they're not living a luxury house and a large McMansion or whatever, and they're not going to Europe a few times a year, that would be considered failure for them. So there's no judgment, but it's really just important to understand, where do you see yourself going in the next few years? Where would you like to go? So there's no gap in expectations between each other. You don't want to find that out years down the track when things may have not gone to plan and you realize your partner actually had much bigger aspirations than you thought. And at this stage, it's important not to judge anyone. Just let people get stuff out in the open and really talk about it freely so you can get an honest, true representation of where they would like to go. Tip number 3 is having total transparency along the way. So it's important in my view to have all your cards out on the table. In terms of income, in terms of expenses, in terms of how your job's going, how your business is going, whatever it is, transparency is really important. There are a lot of people where one person knows everything about the finances and the other person knows nothing. Now, if the other person doesn't care about the finances, that's fine. However, I think it's important that both parties can access any information that they choose. And you might have one person that takes the lead with the finances because they're more interested in it. Like that's for me. I'm very into this stuff. My wife is somewhat interested in this stuff, but it's a strength of mine. So it makes sense for me to sort of own that and drive that. But if she wanted to know what's in any of the bank accounts, whether it's my company account or whatever it is, I would happily show her because it's important to have that transparency, and it kind of reduces a lot of frustration. It makes it very, very clear about the true position of things. And a lot of disagreements usually happen because people find out something that they didn't expect. Like they're not making as much money as they thought, or their expenses are much higher than we thought. Number 4 is setting the right expectations from day one. Now, when a lot of people try to get their partner more enthusiastic about personal finance, it's usually by it's very crude and it's like hitting a blunt object over them, trying to force them to be in love with managing your personal finances. Now, in the real world, that's not really how it plays out. One person is typically more into it than the other. Sometimes you get a couple where they're both into it, good for you. But in most instances, one person is a little bit more interested, and that's totally fine. And I think if you're trying to force someone to be a numbers nerd or a ETF nerd or super into the stock market and they're not that interested, you're just never going to get anywhere. And showing some people crazy complicated spreadsheets about when you guys are going to be able to retire, that might not be how they respond to information. That might not be the best way to present that information to them. Usually it's better to initiate a more casual conversation rather than jumping into hectic spreadsheets from day one. Tip number 5 is around frequent, honest communication. Now, this is probably good for your relationship anyway, but when it comes to money, often things that can happen are their income goes from high to low, or the expenses go from low to high, and there are fluctuations. Money is dynamic. The situation can change. You can have a lot of job security and then suddenly go to not a lot of job security. So there's all these things are changing all the time, and it's important that you keep your partner in the loop with how things are going. I know for me that, say, for example, in September, a lot of my big expenses start to line up with car insurance and house insurance and all that sort of stuff. So I know that month is typically not great for expenses, but I can sort of plan accordingly. But I keep my wife in the loop around how that sort of flows. Same with income. If I have a good month in the business, I usually let my wife know. And I kind of sort of keep her in the loop with how things are going. It's important that she knows an accurate picture of what's happening for me rather than maybe thinking things are going great. And then if I have a disaster of a month, then she's not thinking, oh, I can spend whatever, it doesn't matter. Because we're regularly chatting, we are always very clear about where we're both at. And my wife does the same. If she's got a huge amount of expenses that month, it's good for me to know that so I can maybe rein my spending in so we can kind of balance it all out. Number 6 is adding in fun and rewards along the way once you hit certain milestones. Now, building wealth can be pretty miserable for some people. You're basically saying no to heaps of stuff. You're not spending a lot of money. You can't do some stuff that you may want to do. Maybe going on no holidays or much more conservative holidays than you would like. And it can be not a lot of fun, and that can put strain on the relationship. So it is important to create a positive feedback loop so that when you do reach some sort of milestone, there is little rewards along the way, and that can sort of keep your motivation levels higher as you go rather than, keeping it miserable the whole way. Because it could be it's a marathon, not a sprint, and you could be spending 5 years even, setting yourself up for some sort of level of financial security, and that's a long time to not do any fun stuff. So make sure you pepper in some fun stuff along the way so that it is a bit more sustainable. And that could be something as simple as going out to a local restaurant. It could be going to a fancy restaurant. It could be buying them a small gift. It could be going on a little holiday. Make it relative to the size of the milestone, but little things like that can keep things fun and more enjoyable along the way. And number 7 is be proactive in helping each other achieve their goals. Often I see couples sort of work in silos and separately. One thing that I found really useful, and I guess I really appreciate, is both me and my partner, my wife, we both regularly try and help each other make more money, keep our expenses in check, or save money. And we always talk to each other about, for me, my business, and for her, her career. And we're always talking about how to move up in her career, or to get better opportunities, or how to grow her income. And same for me, if we go out to social events, she's always meeting people. She knows the type of company that I will typically work with and my ideal client profile. And she's always got that sort of radar on to know that, if we're out socializing, she'll meet people and she'll be like, you should speak to that person. I think they're a really good fit to be a client. So it is a team sport. I think, it can be something that's a very positive, fun part of the relationship. And, if you work together rather than just working in opposite directions, you'll basically build your wealth significantly faster than everybody else. So there's my tips. I hope you found that useful. If you have any tips that you think are really useful around talking about money with your partner, please let me know in the comments. And other than that, I'll see you on the next video.